My name is Bram. It's my colleague Robert. We're here to tell you our story, our Deloitte story on how to accelerate the digital transformation with a particular focus on challenges that we see in regulated industries. So, quick intro on myself. I lead the Deloitte Cloud Engineering team in the Belgian firm. My focus is on a lot of regulated industries, mainly governments, public sector organizations, and some utility companies. Robert, quick intro on yourself.
Yeah, my name is Robert van der Pol. I'm leading the digital responsible cloud business in the Netherlands, focusing on highly regulated industries and clients, in taking into account cybersecurity, privacy, and regulation. And today I'm going to talk together with Bram about our lessons learned in this industry, how to accelerate basically your cloud transformation in this industry while navigating all these challenges and our experiences so far on this.
Thank you, Robert. So Robert talks a lot about risks. That's his thing. I like to talk a lot about opportunities, about innovations. So you'll see we have a bit of a good cop, bad cop play today. So what is our goal for this session? It's actually pretty simple. What we would like to do is push the needle forward for you in what you believe you can do with cloud. And we know there's a lot of blockers, there's a lot of bias towards security, risk, compliance, etc. at cloud. And this is keeping a lot of organizations down in their potential. And we're not going to solve all the problems today, but what we hope to do is inspire you that you can do a lot more than maybe imaginable. So this is sort of our agenda. We have 4 things we want to talk to you about today. So first, we'll talk a bit about what do we see happening in the industry and why is cloud key today? Why is cloud needed today to drive innovation forward in pretty much every industry that we work with? We'll talk about risks, obviously. We'll talk about real risks. We'll talk about perceived risks, because not all risks, any risk originate from bias, sometimes lack of knowledge. And we're going to talk about how to handle and deal with risks. Even to the extent, as you see on the third element over there, that you can automate risk control. So it's not just dealing with them with Excels, with lists, with documents, with policies. It's also building it into the automation in how you use cloud to manage your risks. And then finally, that's the last part of our session, once we established this framework for how to manage your risk in a proper way, we're going to talk a bit about the possibilities that we believe you should be looking into towards the future. So this is the first one, need for new opportunities. It's a little burning platform slide, but it's still okay. Why is there a need for new opportunities? It's no longer about evolving as a company, evolving your services, sometimes coming up with something new. It's really about pushing things forward. And the urgency, the need is really there. And why is the need there? What we see, all of us every day, our lives got extremely convenient. And we're used to be treated in such a great way by many of the services we use every day. We want to have access to data wherever we are at any time of the day. We want to be able to watch state-of-the-art video material anywhere we are, on Netflix, for example. Nowadays, we want to go to the store, do our groceries, and just walk out without paying because the system checks it for you. It's all gotten very convenient. And you see that we start to expect this as a citizen from our governments, but just as much in healthcare, just as much in financial industries, etc., etc. And this is why there is a need today. It's no longer just an evolutionary story. This is a very nice quote from an agency that Robert and I actually worked with, and we helped them define their cloud strategy this year. It's a quote from the leadership, and they don't see cloud per se as a solution to a particular business problem. They really look at cloud as the technology that they need to stay relevant as an agency. So the technology that cloud can bring them is going to allow them to build the next generations of services for citizens and industries in Europe. Robert, anything you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, I think what is also important to note is while you have innovation and agility, etc., all these nice words, it's also about your workforce. So many of our clients, CTOs, CIOs, they say if we don't have an attractive cloud stack or IT stack that our developers will work on, I'm losing a lot of talent. Developers hate to work on old frameworks, old type of technology. So for us, it's really keen in order to bridge, to move towards cloud, to actually make sure that we have the right developers in our team, the most brilliant engineers. So it's basically also a talent war on talent, So if you are able, and today we will talk about it, able to navigate all these risks and compliance risks and controls, it will make sure that your engineers will stay close to you, because it's in their interest to work with, in this case, AWS technology. It's better for their career. So this is something we also emphasize. That's also a push towards cloud technologies.
So let's talk a minute about what we see happening in the market. Of course, in the market of regulated industries, it's a very big market. So we took a few things that you see happening across the board, and one is on data-driven decision making. It's been there already for a few years, but you see the need and the importance of data in decision making increasing. And you can see this in many, many levels. Like I said, you can see this as a government in the next generation of public services that you deliver towards citizens, towards companies. The expectations are only going up. But you can see this in healthcare as well, for example. If we want to be able to treat people in the best possible way, we need to be able to use the data to give them the care that they deserve. You see this as well in many other industries that have huge amounts of valuable data, and they cannot use it today, or they struggle to use it today. You can just as much imagine that as an insurer or as a bank, you want to be able to give customers a fine-tuned, a personalized product, a personalized experience. But for that, you need to be able to tap into the data and make decisions and make products for them. Closely links, of course, to what you see on innovation urgency. That's the urgency, because what I said earlier, we expect this. We are getting used to being treated in such a way, so we also expect this from the whole ecosystem around us, not just those state-of-the-art startup scale-up companies that bring new services towards us. Of course, and it's been also mentioned a few times, I think by Philippe Merle earlier in the keynote, that the whole topic around sovereignty is key, is very important, it's top of mind. Where am I putting my data, where am I storing my data, and how do I deal with this? And in the past, we would often recommend to bring your data to where your compute power is. Nowadays, we're much more looking into bringing your compute power to where the data is, so you can stay close to the sovereignty rules as well. And the last one is on adapting for more privacy critical kinds of data. Because you see many, many organizations taking their first steps, making their first moves to cloud, but always in a safer environment, using some public data which is not too sensitive. And nowadays there's a huge trend on how can we tap into that other potential with the much more sensitive elements that we gather and that we manage. There's also our perspective from Deloitte. This is something from a report that we publish each year. It's called the Deloitte Tech Trends Report. And it's how we look at the impact on the market of many technologies. And this one is particular on cloud. So what does it say? It's about cloud goes vertical. It's a catchy way to say, it's what you see on top of the slide, basically climb the stack. What does it mean? Cloud providers and partners and vendors that work on cloud are increasingly making our life easier. So they are taking away all the commodity efforts that we needed to do in the past. Today, no one is building an HR application anymore, you just use one. No one is building their own AI, ML platform, you just use the ones that are available in the market. So by climbing the stack, you have an opportunity to focus on the things that matter, and you avoid the need to work on the commodity stuff. That's what you see on the bottom left with it's building a capacity to change. So what does it mean, the capacity to change? If you look at the teams that you have today, and you can avoid that they have to spend their times, their efforts on things that are becoming very, very common and repeatable, you can actually stimulate your workforce and have them spend time on changing things, on innovating things, on bringing new ideas, instead of working on those things that are very repetitive and get boring over time. Which links to the last part, which is doubling down on differentiation. It's a bit of a CIO point of view towards the thing. It means, again, make sure the commodity is properly sourced and you don't have to worry about it, so you can spend your budgets and your efforts on change, on innovation. Of course, and that's also why we're here. It's a nice pitch to do all of this, and I don't have to convince anyone here, I think, on the potential of cloud. But you see, there are challenges, there are blocking factors. There's three we would like to highlight. Structural issues, that's one of them. Often in regulated industries, you see very, very heavy legacy systems, environments you don't just overnight transform and adapt to cloud, especially not in a compliant way. But also on the people dimension. You don't just hire 10, 20, 30 talented cloud people in the market. We are looking for them. I'm pretty sure many people in the room are looking for them. They're just not out there. So there are a few fundamental difficulties that we have to deal with. And we also have to be honest, if you look at it from a legal point of view, there is no perfect legal framework to work in today. There is still some work to be done, some legislation to be adapted, which is of course going to happen over time. What else is there? There are regulatory industry requirements. So each industry, let's not forget, they have their specific needs. If you look at healthcare, if you look at FSI, if you look at governments, etc., there are regulations that apply to each industry specifically. So you always need to adapt as well the way you deal and look and manage risks and work with the data based on what the industry requirements are telling you. And then I mentioned it before, data residency is essential. It's top of mind. We see huge investments, huge evolutions, but we also see that still a lot of bias is out there. People are still believing that data is transferred anywhere without their control, even with the huge investments that are being made to just avoid that and guarantee that things are properly managed. So this is another quote from one of our clients. It's actually something that they used when interacting with their own teams, with their own people. And they noticed that many people in their organization, they basically said, if it's on-premise, it's more secure. That's the way it is. And I think we've all been looking at the news. We've all seen data breaches. We've all seen hackings of on-premise environments in recent years. And in this particular client, they were convinced that actually cloud is an answer to a security channel. For them, it was an opportunity to be more secure by moving to cloud. And that's what they said. It seems to be a religion that people believe that because it's on-premise and you are in control, that it's by default also more secure, which is not the case at all. So Robert, anything you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, a couple of things maybe here is indeed on this client, they were migrating from their on-premise environment towards the first public cloud workloads. And basically this quote came while we were doing the transition together with Bram and myself. And basically a zero-day exploit was being released on the day. And then I would say the true power of cloud came to life because it was quite easy for them in their AWS environment to start patching all those machines over thousands instead of their on-premise services, which it took them almost a week to actually fix all those zero-day patches. So for them, and especially the ops and the engineers, it was quite clear that the religion or the myth about cloud that it cannot be, it's actually not more secure than your on-premise environment was actually taken away already by seeing it actually happen in practice. So what I'm going to take you through now we've actually discussed a little bit the potential of cloud. I will tell you a little bit about the most common challenges that we see in the market now, and especially in the highly regulated industries. And I will tell you a little bit about, first of all, the perceptions of stakeholders and how you can best manage those within your organizations or institutions. I will detail out also some use cases which we used within Deloitte to actually help to facilitate the process. Not only talking about it, but also demonstrating it, pen testing it, and verifying that. So I think it's about this. So Bram and myself, we are doing a lot of cloud engagements for many years. And I think the first step when public organizations in highly regulated industries are going to, let's say, to cloud is they get overwhelmed. Especially first about the regulations that are coming up to them. Secondly, I would say sometimes it's hard for integration partners that they're partnering with that will take up this regulation, security, and compliance burden. Some integrators say, that's all your responsibility, dear customer. We're not taking any of it. Or they take it up, but they don't do a proper job on that. And some things actually, what we will discuss today, I think we can help, and maybe we can inspire you also today, is about taking a more holistic view, including technical controls of it, but don't forget also the human aspect of it. And I will explain that a little bit about these analogies that we still see happen today. And basically, it's about mistrust of public cloud services, not from outside in, but maybe also within your organization. And we see typically organizations that are having trouble going to cloud there's a cultural clash between two people, or two stakeholders, basically. On the one side, you have the cloud engineers that really like to work with, especially AWS, machine learning, all the stuff that you hear today. But on the other hand, you have, we call them second line people. It's basically the IT risk professionals, people that need to validate whether the engineers are not taking any unacceptable risk. And this is an example of one of our, let's say, highly regulated industry clients. And basically, when we did the first intake, we noted that, let's say on the right side, we have the IT risk professionals that need to verify whether security and developers and DevOps engineers didn't make any mistakes. They think, oh, these cloud engineers, well, they just learned the trick, right? Oh, they are taking unauthorized risk. They take shortcuts, always. So that's a little bit mistrust on the one hand. But on the other hand, there's also mistrust on the, I would say, cloud engineers or developers towards these risk professionals. They say, you guys are outdated. You don't understand what APIs are. I'm not going to explain you 5 times. I think also you always, and this is the analogy that we quite often hear, is about, yeah, when you guys hear about cloud, it's basically you hear us talking about we're putting asbest basically into the IT environment. You're so negative about it, and you're always, most of the time, not helping us. You're saying basically everything is no. No, you cannot go to public cloud, it's not secure, etc. So there's no collaboration. And I think the most important thing that will happen, if you're not solving this, I would say this issue internally, is that cloud transformations will go on hold. There will be no cloud movements. This is something we actually saw happening. And therefore, I think it's also important to make a bridge between, let's say, the engineers that are actually building platforms, creating great features on a daily basis, and people that need to verify within the organization that you're doing the right thing. And I've seen in the past that this challenge was more driven from a CISO office or information risk officers, but now CTOs, CIOs, they are, I would say, take the lead themselves back. They say this cloud transformation, it's so urgent, we need to stay competitive. I will make sure that I have security, privacy, and compliance in my program, and you guys can validate if that's correct or not. So they're taking back control, and I will explain you why I think it's a good idea and how to do that. A couple of things to take into account about risk management in cloud. And this is a model which we normally use in bigger cloud transformations. And today, you will see a lot of, let's say, technical solutions here about AWS System Manager and Solution Integrator, AWS Config. It's great technology, and AWS has great technology to use it. But you need to think a little bit more holistically too in order to have successful cloud transformation programs. So for example, on the strategic risk, you need to understand which cloud vendor are we? Are we going for multi-cloud or not? What are the pros and cons of that? Or what are the perception of the board about public cloud? Is one vendor negatively perceived because maybe this vendor or cloud hyperscaler will enter the market, our own market maybe? So taking a more step back, and not these cloud transformations being driven mostly by only tech or developers will benefit you in succeeding in your cloud transformation programs. If people ask us, and this is also a little bit a myth that Bram and myself talk about, yeah, public or cloud, what is the difference? Can you please tell me? Because I think it's still, sometimes people say, yeah, it's just cloud, call it IT technology. I don't understand what are the key new risks that will arise. This slide will help you a little bit in explaining why cloud has different risks, and we need to make sure that also the controls or the measures are different than your traditional, let's say, IT on-premise controls. So first of all, obviously, API security is more important than your on-premise environments. So you need to make sure, in order to have access to APIs, you need to make sure that the keys are rotated on a frequent basis. Those are secured. Those are your I would say, the keys of the kingdom. If you can obtain these APIs, and we do that within Deloitte quite often in a tech and cloud environments, validating that, this is the first stuff that we're going for. And if we have access to it, public cloud environments are quite well described for hackers. They can actually quite easily get there. So on the first stop, API security is very important. Other things is on-demand service, different than on-premise. So you can spin up any environment on that. Why is that a risk? Yes, obviously from costs, but also about, are you spinning up new services maybe that are not in line with your risk appetite? For example, spinning up services that don't have sufficient audit logging in place, and thereby you're actually in non-compliance with regulatory requirements of that. Last thing I would like to highlight on this slide is obviously the broad network access element. So you have, of course, access anywhere, anytime. So if you make a small mistake, and most mistakes in cloud environments are still misconfiguration of elements, forgetting to encrypt stuff, forgetting to make public IPs not publicly available actually, and make it private. You need to set rules on that. And you need to set those rules in a repetitive manner, and most importantly, in highly regulated industry, make them auditable, verifiable. Can somebody externally understand that these controls are actually in place of that? Last thing before I will take you to the detailed examples that we actually gathered through our journeys is it's also about balancing risk and value. What I sometimes miss, let's say, in highly regulated industries or people that have trouble is that sometimes the debate internally is very black-white. We cannot go cloud because we think it's insecure, or, well, there's no business case for it, or, we have only highly sensitive data, so there's no way we can move. A more balanced view about what is still possible for highly regulated industries or type of services is needed. So you first need to define your risk appetite as an organization. You need to classify your data. It's all the basic, I would say, information security stuff. But a lot of clients forget that, and they say, we simply cannot go. And we basically tell you, let's take a step back, classify the information, put the additional controls in place, and still we can move to cloud, yes or no. And still that helps, again, CIOs, CTOs, to at least start their journeys, maybe not immediately with the mission-critical, let's say, applications, but let's say 70, 80% of their other infrastructure can slowly start to move towards cloud as well. So if we take, for example, an approach, and this is an approach that we've took at one of our other clients in the public sector as well. A couple of things I would like to highlight. It starts all with identifying the relevant risks and regulations that are in place. So of course, there's NIST, there's ISO certifications, all types of regulations, but making sure you understand them is a first good input to it. Then the second step, we always say, is take the engineers and the IT technology as a basis, instead of immediately applying the frameworks or controls. That means that if you go to cloud environments, you have a great opportunity to rationalize your internal control frameworks, make it more automated, do it smarter. Please listen to your engineers, I would say. They have great ideas most of the time to start wasting time on collecting evidencing. They are also, I would say, in your favor to help rationalize those control frameworks. They probably know a little bit more on how to create a Lambda function to automate security on that. So we go back to the engineers first. We explore what type of IT technology do you really need in this cloud. Then we create the control libraries on it. And then maybe you've all heard, hopefully, about the AWS responsibility model. Basically explaining this is what AWS is responsible for. It's responsible for security of the cloud, and in the cloud, it's the responsibility of the client. But then it really starts. What is I would say, the customer really responsible for? So we will break down between what is DevOps responsible for, what is a CISO responsible for in a cloud environment, what are security engineers doing or development teams doing it? Do you have a container team, for example, in your organization? What type of controls are sitting with them? And that's where I think the key is having those conversations with DevOps teams, educating them on security and compliance, and helping them on automating that stuff. And then running it into an organization as well. So how can we best do this? And basically, Most of you probably have heard about it. It's compliance as code. It's basically if some security pattern or security measure is repeatable, you better start putting that in code. And in AWS, you have various examples how to do that. So for example, you can use CloudFormation Duty or CloudFormation Guard to make sure once a developer starts coding, it doesn't accidentally store hard-coded keys in the code. That's maybe in the beginning of your journey. Then actually, once it starts deploying it, you have all those type of various services. This is very different from your traditional IT control frameworks or COBIT frameworks that in the banking industry help. This is not a solution. One of the quotes that I still remember, one of the CIOs, and he told me, Robert, I hear so many people tell me what I need to do on regulatory and compliance. I have maybe 10 people who tell me, but I have only one people actually that knows how to do it. So basically, the metaphor he uses is basically we are actually sitting together in a rowing boat, going on to the river. And there are 10 people shouting in a microphone, you need to do this on compliance, you need to be GDPR compliant. But there are very little people that tell me how. How to do it then. Give me tools, give me implementation guidelines, show me how to do that. And that's, of course, where the road hits the rubber, how to do this actually. This is maybe, and I want to pause a little bit about the case study that we've done at one of the other clients, doing it in a, let's say, phased approach. So first of all, the step one is, again, make sure you know which type of guidelines or regulatory guidelines you need. So some clients, they perfectly know that. Some clients, they struggle. They don't know whether I should use NIST or ISO type of best practice guidelines. What we normally do is basically give an indication of what are the pros and cons of different type of frameworks. So what is really you need to be compliant with, there's no room to negotiate, or things that we say, well, if you take this, let's say CSA framework, it's more practical, it's more concrete. But we also take then into account CIS benchmark controls. And I would say CIS benchmark controls is a very good control framework that can help you in prioritizing security controls and compliance controls in your framework. It basically gives you a ranking of controls, so which ones are the most important and which ones are needed in case you have very highly sensitive workloads with highly sensitive information. It's a very practical one, which we at Deloitte really like to implement if people start with their journey on cloud as well. The last thing in the left bucket is basically understanding the threat landscape. You don't want to protect against everything, but in certain industries, we see certain particular patterns, especially in the highly regulated industry, which is about they're looking for, let's say, persistent threats, about looking for your IP information. That requires different type of controls in your framework, and you need to test them as well. So basically, that's the first step on the control framework that we defined. Then the second step is very important. That's the middle ground. That's actually the implementation guidelines. So basically, we stress that in order to implement controls, you need to have a little bit of security engineering experience in cloud environments. It's too new. It's getting updated basically every week, new features in AWS Macie or AWS Cloud Duty, Guard Duty, AWS Config, CloudTrail. It's hard to keep up with those new services as we know it. But the benefit of having a very good foundation in, let's say, having preventative controls with config rules. So there's, for an engineer, not possible to spin up an S3 bucket without encryption or without sufficient audit logging. We codify that, exactly. We start monitoring that with Guard Duty, and we report it back to the teams. So that implementation guideline is basically hands-on security engineers that will help you to actually start implementing that stuff. And how we do it, basically, again, because we still have those risk professionals in the background, right? Which I told you before, very skeptical about engineers. Basically, we do a security test, see if we can get the data. Can we bypass, let's say, security or a CI/CD pipeline that you developed? And that step about verification, just pen testing it or whatever you call it in cloud, gives the proof to the IT risk professionals that it was appropriately designed and there was no way to scout it and it's the best security that we can have. The last aspect here, and that's what the regulators will tell you about, is show me the evidence. How have you created this framework? Well, this is the new directive that we have. I want to see whether you have implemented in your organization, not only from a technical point of view, but also from a process point of view. And therefore, what will help us, and that's what we have actually developed also with the Deloitte, is basically putting on this, let's say, extensive list of Excel set that Bram is telling you about. We basically created a visualization layer with graph technology over it. And basically, it's a visualization of which controls have you implemented, but most importantly, which regulation are you adhering to? So whether it's in this framework, whether it's CISO, of ISO, what type of regulations do you have in place? It maps it against which AWS components you're actually using in your organization. And it details out who's responsible for it. So is it the CCOE team that is basically responsible for making sure that no EC2 instances can be used or only secure AMI images can be used? That comes all through I would say, the previous slide that I explained on, let's say, the various approach steps. So this is the end result, basically giving you the dashboards, showing you which controls you have in place, which not. And it has two benefits, in my point of view. The first benefit is more that the engineers, they don't like to talk Excels. So they will, if you come with an Excel and tell them, please implement this, they will scare you away. They say, I'm not interested in, let's say, 500 lines of controls which I need to implement. But if we show them a little bit of graph visualization, they start to get excited. They say, OK, give me the code. I want to see. Show me which things I can automate. Oh, yeah, I introduced I'm using AWS config to do this. OK, we put this in the framework. And the second one, why it's good, is because the IT risk professionals that we talked about, which are, well, their concern is, did I see no mistakes in this environment? Did I do the perfect audit on this? They can feel a little bit more comfortable that, at least from a completion point of view, all regulations or compliance things are at least visible and adhered, hopefully, also to. So I would like to conclude a little bit now on, how does this work? So again, take maybe three points away. Keep the engineer in mind, please. Don't start using the traditional on-premise control frameworks and apply it on AWS or any other cloud vendor. It will not work. Engineers will not adhere to you, and it will not create additional trust or additional, let's say, assurance which you need. Secondly, focus on optimization. You heard it today, hopefully, in a lot of sessions. There's a lot of possibilities with Security Hub. Get yourself educated with it. Ask help if you cannot do that. Basically, from our side, we have all developed these kind of accelerators with implementation guidelines that not only show you the what, but show you also the how to do it. So please do that. Keep that in mind. And then hopefully you can start actually put your new workloads into the cloud in a secure and compliant manner, Bram. So I hope that helps you get your workloads in the cloud now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Thank you, Robert.
Right.
So indeed, as Robert explained, if you work with both the people working on developing new solutions, on innovation day to day, and you work with those people that want to see the evidence that you secure everything, that you take care of the risk, that you understand that they also have a very regulatory responsibility. If you bring those together, what you create is a framework of trust within your organization. And if you have that foundation on trust, that's when you can start innovating. And that's essential. And it is essential to have those two dimensions that Robert mentioned, not to do this in isolation, because then you will lose the bridge, as Robert showed earlier. So from this, we'll talk a bit about what can we do now. And first, I want to do a quick scene setting on how we look at cloud and why cloud actually today is so important. Because cloud has been around for 20, 30 years. But 20, 30 years ago, it was about an IT topic. It was a technology discussion. It was basically, to put it very simple, should I put my server in my own basement, or am I going to put it in the basement of someone else and they take care of it? It was very, very much an infrastructure discussion. So it was also only on the desk of CIO, CTO. You saw some things changing 10, 15 years ago with a lot of the big SaaS platforms coming up, the importance and the amount of data going up. You start to see some business capabilities being provided on top of cloud. You can think on solutions like Workday for HR, Salesforce for your CRM. And you saw as well with the volumes of data going up that companies started to reconsider where they should be putting their hardware, and if not, it would make sense to scale via some cloud solutions. But the real fun happened through companies like AWS that in recent years have given us so much innovative technologies, and not just as one package. They give us a multitude of state-of-the-art services that we can use to innovate ourselves. So we can cherry pick like a Lego. We can cherry pick those things that we like, and we can combine them to solve our problems in an innovative way. And if you can start from innovative technologies, you can only imagine what you can do with them by smartly combining them. It's really where the last two, you could say it was an evolution in the technology space. What we see nowadays, it's really a revolution, and it's only going to accelerate. And that acceleration is also important because as a regulated industry, like we said, the expectations from citizens, from customers are only going to go up. So the technology is not going to slow down. It's only going to come faster and faster and faster at it. So today is the day to establish that trust foundation so you can tap into these innovations of tomorrow. And if we look at these innovations, it's also a bit of a gradual story, you can say. Cloud, it will still solve application hosting and infrastructure challenges. There's legacy to be managed. There are some applications today that are still more suitable for a more traditional infrastructure stack. But what it brought us next to it is accelerated product development capability. So by automating, by giving some frameworks, we've been able to develop new things a lot faster. And not just new applications, but also really innovative things that are groundbreaking, and we get access to technology that you could not even imagine before. The things you can do on cloud today, those are just not realistic to build yourself in an on-premise environment. And by tapping into those innovative services, what we can do these days is, it's the fourth element on the slide, it's really create new businesses, new products. I gave the example of Netflix earlier. Can you imagine with your own data centers to scale from a few hundred or a few thousand to millions of users in the span of months or years? It's just not realistic to do these things. So these are business that just exist because the cloud enabled them to. And the next iteration, that's really at the end of the chain, what you will see is that it's not just creating a new product or a new service or a new business for yourself. It's about creating completely new ecosystem. So you create a new market where you are a part of the market, but you work with partners, with alliances, with other suppliers to create a completely new ecosystem, building on what cloud has to offer, and also stimulate them to innovate with cloud and bring the next generation of services. And this is another quote from a customer that we had. And you see we have great clients, they make very nice quotes. What they said is, cloud allows us to do things today which would not be would have been possible with conventional IT, with conventional on-premise environments. They are very much into gathering data, processing data, using AI, ML to do so. But it's been a journey for them as well. You don't just start one day with these technologies. So you need to try some of them, try some of the frameworks, try some of the technology to see what fits for our use case, what works with what we are doing. Are we looking at real-time data or real-time processing? And all of these things together allow them very quickly to experiment on AWS with the different types of services. And once they were proven, they could scale them, and that's how they look at it. And it's been so important for them. So this is a client success story, just wanted to touch upon. We've also been touched upon during the keynote by Kirsten. It's a great collaboration that we've been able to do with the World Wildlife Fund, AWS, and ourselves as Deloitte. Their slides look better than this one, so I should have spent maybe a bit more time on putting some nice graphs in it. But anyway, it was a huge opportunity for us to work on this collaboration, and you see really the power of cloud come to life here. And they started from a data science process, basically, that they managed to very quickly optimize, experiment with, and scale up until the moment that now they are, as was explained also in the keynote, they can roll out their solution for detecting and preventing deforestation, which of course has an amazing impact on our planet. A few last things we would like to give you as advice, because this is what we see from experience at all of our customers on how to start your accelerated cloud journey. Of course, there's the trust framework, and there's a reason why we put it at the top, it's talent. I said it already in the beginning, it's just not possible to find cloud professionals in bulk in the job market. They don't exist. Everyone wants them. Everyone trains them, they're just not out there. So if you are ambitious with cloud, make sure to invest upfront and think about a proper talent strategy. Train your people, look for the people with potential rather maybe than the full stack of certifications already, because it's going to allow you to grow much faster. And we did a benchmark last year with a lot of regulated clients, and they said, looking back at their cloud journeys, that's number one that they should have done differently. Should have thought about talent first. Second element is executive sponsorship. Make sure that the whole organization believes in what you do, that you have a board level approving the cloud vendor that you're working with, and make sure that everybody believes in the story. Next one is culture and communication. It's very much aligned with what Robert said. Create that framework for trust across the organization. Communicate, talk to each other, make sure that risk professionals believe the story that an engineer brings and the other way around. And make sure the business is aligned as well. And it's really about changing your whole organization, creating awareness with the people that cloud is important, that sense of urgency, the sense of potential, that's something everybody should be believing in. And then finally, a last recommendation that we would give is start small and accelerate fast. Don't try to solve everything in a big bang. It's just too difficult. Successes lead to more successes. So start with one use case, start with one success, turn it into the next, and the ball will start rolling. And that's the best way to approach this, because otherwise it's the chance that you will fail or it will take too long or you will make mistakes along the way is just too high. So that's basically it for our part of this presentation. As I said, our ambition was to inspire you a bit, push that needle forward. We hope when, after this session, tonight, tomorrow, next week, when you think about the potential of cloud in regulated industries, that you see a bit more potential than what you did this morning. That was our main goal. Few closing remarks, mention talent. Do know that AWS offers a lot of potential, a lot of possibilities with free training, with certifications. It's extremely valuable for your people, for their careers, and for your organization. So don't hesitate to make best use of what AWS has to offer in this area. Should you want to talk to us, we don't have time for a Q&A session here, but we will stick around a bit longer. You can also find us at our booth. So should you want to have a follow-up chat, have a few questions afterwards, don't hesitate to come find us. And as a very final remark, I'd like to ask you to please complete the survey. Tell us what you think. This is very valuable for us. This is very valuable for information for AWS as well. And with that, I'd like to thank Robert. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Enjoy your afternoons. Thank you very much.